Mm. Mic, check, check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Kia me. All right, I see a picture here. Media group.
We ready? I'll start you with this image here.
Okay. All right.
We are ready to go in 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Haki Ami here, live here, broadcasting at eLife Media Group. Thank you all for tuning in at Everlasting Life Restaurant. Thank you all for this opportunity to get some knowledge and share in some good, wholesome empowerment for the times that we're living in. So I'm Haki Ami, the Success Scholar. Thank you all for tuning in. I am ready to go and ready to flow and ready to add on to your weekly activities and operations. And so it's good to be here on eLife Media as well. I want to first get this going here on eLife as we make it happen. Let me make sure I'm on. Are you on, Doc?
Make sure you grab the right video.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look at here.
We got 2 of them up there running at the same time.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at eLife Media.
Yeah.
eLife Media Group. I don't see it on my. Let me see. I see Janice Boss. Let me see.
So I got it right here.
Let me click on it again. Maybe refresh. All right, it's live. I see it now. Wait a minute. I see an old one.
So it's 2 of them. I do that.
Oh, okay. I see it. I saw it somewhere. Let me see.
With the right up on it.
Then where is it? Okay. All right. Let me click that share to my. Of course, I can go back and share it again. All right. Yes. It's a beautiful day. Thank you for tuning in, listening in to this show here. We're going to have a CBC wrap up for what went down at the Congressional Black Caucus. Many of you know I have attended several years, and I thought it's an opportunity for many people to participate and listen and get different pieces to what I believe could be a vital, valuable, insightful intel that many in our communities actually need to understand. And so for many people who may not know the history of the Congressional Black Caucus, I actually did a show last week. I did a book review called The Peacock Elite, which was actually, shall I say, a criticism of sorts, as well as a critique, if you will. Not necessarily every aspect of the analysis was to make mockery of the Congressional Black Caucus, but it was by a former congressperson, Major Owens of New York. And so I did that, and I'm looking forward to having this discussion. So I titled this, as you can see, and I'll have my production gentleman, Dr. Baruch, is in the house. Appreciate him being here. Put the other book, I titled this one, The Red and Blue Pill. And, a lot has been going on about the discussions around both the Omarosa book as well as the April Ryan's book. And I took this picture at the Congressional Black Caucus. So I wanted to entitle this The Red and Blue Pill discussion. And of course, I have on my Neo outfit today, got my all black on. So many people, certainly at the caucus were having much discussion surrounding these 2 books. that both Omarosa as well as April Ryan authored. And so, but I also wanted to propose, should some of my good allies, I would consider certainly them allies, Dr. Umar Johnson, Dr. Boyce Watkins, Dr. Claud Anderson, or Yvette Carnell, should they have attended the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, I posted something. I posted something like on my LinkedIn page, and a brother mentioned some things. He posted something, critique, and people can generally critique. I'm known as a critiquer, and, I offer various criticisms. So he said something about one of the congressmen and what Black Agenda Report has done in terms of their analysis of this particular congressperson. And so I just, added on. I let them know, like some years ago, that's kind of how I started attending the Congressional Black Caucus with the Black Agenda Report, when they actually had report cards of these congresspersons. And so, you know, I'm like, I don't know what, he may not know me, but I thought that, I should share with him that, not everybody is just there just to be miseducated, shall I say, and not everybody is there to just follow the status quo or assimilate, or however individuals choose to perceive or take what is given as the common narrative. So I wanted to share just what I actually got, and I thought about this particular show because at this particular caucus, I was able to get the governor candidate Ben Jealous to be interviewed by Carl Nelson, and he was on Thursday. Actually, Carl was supposed to attend the CBC, and he has broadcast from there for the past few years. And so I worked that out. And then I thought that maybe, yeah, people would certainly like to hear from Mr. Jealous. And I was on Saturday. And so, I'm sorry, I was on Friday with Mr. Brother Carl Nelson. And so had a couple of minutes, but, people, I think, so certainly I would have hoped that people would got my position and where I stood with what I believe is why I attend, and certainly why some others should, particularly those that have, a broad following of sorts, certainly should attend. So coming up, this is, I'm not sure how many CBCs, but the CBC actually was started, to enhance, black political empowerment. And as we know that, from my analysis, politics and economics can or should go together of sorts. So I got a few different things that I got from the CBC, and I'm kind of multitasking here so I can get the rest of that. But some of the workshops that I was able to attend, thank you. Some of the workshops that I was able to get from there were actually the energy workshop, as well as the workshop on STEM. STEM. And this is why I thought that it was ideal for individuals to attend both of these workshops, because both of these industries actually affects our community. But I wanted to read something again I have this book with me. Before I get that, I'm gonna take a little quick pause here and finish this so I can. Um, I'm good. Thank you, thank you. I will. Somebody telling me I should move back. I don't know if that. Okay, I'll put it. Okay. All right. Gotcha. 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 Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. I know you want to see my face. All right. Cool. So as I was organizing this year, several things stood out to me certainly, and I actually attended based upon my relationship. For many may not know, I did run for a office in Baltimore as the state central committee, and my senator, she actually works very hard on social determinants of health. And that's looking at several different areas from transportation to water to these food deserts that we have to the criminal aspects, the law enforcement aspects of the prison, just looking at different poverty, looking at different areas to determine, how health is impacted. So I attended several workshops surrounding that as well. And I wanted to throw out there, and as I was on Carl Nelson's show, someone called in after me, and I'm like, man, did they hear what I said? Like, I mean, because they called in to suggest that not necessarily me, but they said something about Yvette Carnell, or go look at her videos, and I'm sitting there like, well, look, I mean, this is a pivotal time for us in our community. We have 2 years from now, there will be another election. Well, there's a presidential election, but this year is a midterm. If there's any time for individuals to show up, it certainly should have been right now. Now, why do I say that? Because as I mentioned last week, I shared how, for instance, on shall I say, a macro level, that the CBC has opened tremendous opportunities. Many people may not know that some years ago I worked with attorney Tony Robinson, Anthony Robinson. Many people, for instance, in the Maryland area certainly know of him and his work, but he started off working with Pern Mitchell. Now, many people know Pern Mitchell for his role in working with the federal 8A program. And best believe that these things will certainly be under attack. They will certainly be under attack if particular offices are controlled by conservative forces. And let me just make that plain. But I wanted to read something, and this is what I meant by, having an open mind and willingness to learn and willingness to have a strategy. I mean, I didn't go there to just have a good time. I go to get knowledge. And at this particular space, this body brings, I would say, some of the best and brightest to the community, of which many of us need to listen to. So let me just address some of the criticisms. And I know that, many people may not know my background, but, I consider myself a conscious brother, and, as one who has studied Black history very appropriately to understand the various movements within our community, from Garvey to WEB and, many in between. it is essential for individuals to keep a strategic, open mind to understand how to position oneself. I don't know if there's a Garvey versus Booker T either or, a total either or scenario of sorts. And, many individuals can get a little dogmatic in terms of what they believe we should do. But what I found is sometimes it's going to be what you're going to do first, right? How you're going to build yourself and your community, your family, and how you're going to impact the world and others. And so, with that being said, let me just quote, from this particular book and that I'm reading here, and it's talking about the black middle class. So I'll just read this, and I haven't read through this book in some years, but it talks about E. Franklin Frazier was powerless to conceal his disdain for the black middle class. Many people know of E. Franklin Frazier. I read his book several years ago, and sometimes I just feel like posting a book because, many people are pretending, their analysis is limited because they want to have their own following of sorts. They don't want to come out and network and listen to other people of other different sectors or expertise. And not everyone necessarily has the time to do that. But I certainly believe that these particular individuals who I've named, for whatever reason, certainly just for the sake of networking and sharing your knowledge, should or could take the time out to be a part of some sorts. For instance, like the STEM and energy conversations. These conversations could be objective. They're not based upon, certainly culture and history does play a part in where we are today, but I believe that there are some facts, history, and numbers that our community need to hear, that these individuals who work, for instance, in these sectors certainly have. But I wanted to deal with this, because I saw a lot of, pretending going on. And I'm like, this is kind of scary. This is dangerous and scary, for instance, when the masses of black people are under attack. So E. Franklin Frazier was powerless to conceal his disdain for the black middle class. In his 1957 treatise, Black Bourgeoisie, The Rise of the New Middle Class, he says, quote, "They have accepted unconditionally the values of the white bourgeoisie world," he wrote, "its morals and its canons of respectability, its standards of beauty and consumption. In fact, they have tended to emphasize their conformity to white ideals." A few years later, Nathan Hare, another one who I know and met, well, he was at Howard University. He was the original, for many people who may not know who Dr. Nathan Hare or Dr. Julia Hare, his wife. Definitely Google or put it in YouTube, Dr. Julia Hare. She set it off on, Tavis Smiley's one of his talks that he had. But Google that, Julia Hare and Tavis Smiley. It will pop up. And that's his wife. So Nathan Hare echoed Frazier's indictment and lampooned their culture of empty pretense in his deadly accurate polemic, The Black Anglo-Saxons. And he said, "They are resented for their bourgeoisie heirs, white mimicry, social dalliance," dalliance, and courting of opulence and extravagance. At the same time, they are unable to gain unqualified access to the white race, whose ideals and standards occasionally physiognomy, they openly and unshameably adopt as their own. let me quote these gentlemen again. Franklin and Hare have applied a learned analysis to the fury of the black masses. The black masses feel at the class that seems to have gained a foothold on the longed-for American dream. That some of the criticisms of the black middle class is motivated by cold, naked, materialistic envy is certainly true, but income or accomplishments claimed by the black middle class are hardly the issue for the many detractors. Nor are they judged, nor are they, when judged by white American standards, actually middle class. I had this conversation several years ago about what is perceived middle class. And I'm not going to dwell that. I'll read more of that, but it's just fascinating when other ethnic groups, for instance, are coming to the black community and they're establishing businesses, and there's no connecting of the dots of sorts with our own leadership and our own community. And so that's why I had to add, individuals into this conversation, because I believe that many individuals have different points, and many I've actually reached out to actually have some sort of unity, to attend some strategy session to actually impact some power, some global power. And I'll just give an example of one of the other workshops that I attended. Let me find that book, and this is the Black Meetings and Tourism magazine. And I went with Brother Lou Fields. He took me to this one, but it was some serious people in there. It was a sister from Zimbabwe. It was a brother from somebody from Canada, just talking about the power of tourism. So I grabbed a few of these magazines, but one thing that was interesting, I posted this on my wall. The gentleman said something about 47 black billionaires. And I know somebody posted, well, how many comparatively are white? Or somebody posted like 2 billion something Caucasians. Now, not to say that, wealth, is the only strategy or ideal of consciousness, because I believe that there's consciousness and there's culture as well. And unfortunately, if, for instance, and I'm bringing it back to what, I mentioned about, this black bourgeoisie, if you have these materialistic values, for instance, of the petty bourgeoisie, that money is going to be gone anyway, because you're going to do things like you're going to, buy red bottoms. You're going to, be like Kobe Bryant and spend money on some blood diamonds that cost you $2 million. And you're going to give it like Dr. Dre. You're going to be unconscious and give your money to, what's the USC, right? Because you are attempting to make people feel comfortable with you. And you're not going to give it and work on behalf of your people and your community once you get the money. And so that's actually part of the challenge that, I've seen and what I've experienced. And so, when Dr. Boyce Watkins, for instance, not to necessarily call him out, but like, you got to speak about wealth from a cultural perspective, right? You can't just talk about investing in Wall Street and, black people don't even have their own institutions. Or what I believe is certainly Africa should have a Wall Street of sorts, or investing in the black African stock markets, and there are several. There are several, and there's a book out called Investing in Africa. And that was principally one of the conversations. Dr. Ron Daniels, was one of the speakers at this tourism event. And, Lutfield, certainly in the Baltimore market, does a tremendous job with educating black people about the tourism industry in Maryland. So I'm going to just go through some of the things that was going on. This is one of the newspapers that shows the different events that went down. Let me just kind of browse through this. Black veterans disproportionately struggle with homelessness. They said there's no doubt that the face of the American military is changing and is becoming increasingly brown and black, according to the Pew Research Center. In 2017, racial and ethnic minority groups made up 40% of active duty military. It said, given this disproportionately high numbers of the black military personnel, any issues that affect veterans disproportionately impacts of African Americans. The Department of Veteran Affairs has been troubled. While the current administration has had difficulty in finding and keeping VA secretary, VA troubles started long before. In 2014, CNN reported on secret patient list that hid the fact that some patients have waited months to be seen. You all remember that. The VA challenges come at a time when the veterans need a functioning government agency more than ever. Homeless rates for veterans remain high. Military veterans face higher risk of traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, both of which are among the most significant factors contributing to homelessness. Opioid use is another contributing factor. So I attended one workshop on HIV, and generally I attend mostly either the technology, business, or the entrepreneurial workshops. And there's one I have here. I didn't get a chance to make it to. Let me find it. Here it is. It was called Beyond. Wait a minute. I don't think this is it. Here it is. Here's one. It's the same. It's the same one. Okay. Black Money Matters. Black Money Matters Thursday. This is on Thursday. And this is Cunningham, an economist, William Cunningham. He was one of the presenters, and I only caught a couple minutes of this. Charles Wilson, Director of Workforce Development. Samantha Sanders, Director of Economic and Policy Institute. A former NBA player, Arentz Funderburk. I heard somebody mention something about him in a conversation. So I didn't get to see all of them discussed, but Dr. Julian Melville was one of the speakers as well. Oh, shoot. That one is cut off. Dr. Julianne Melville was one of them. And there was this other discussion. As you can see, April Ryan's book is right up in front of me for those who are looking. And I do have several copies of that. She'll be at the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus coming up here in a couple months. So we are looking forward to that. And after I leave here, I will be attending the Maryland Legislative Black Caucus Annapolis meeting. And they have some pretty sharp progressive leadership. But for those that want something to walk away with from the foundation actually puts this together. There's a journal, and it says, Defining the Black Agenda in Post-Obama Era, right? And there's several books that have been written about post-Obama. And let me just share this. The Congressional Black Caucus Foundation is pleased to announce the inaugural issue of the Journal for the Center for Policy Analysis and Research. Now, many people can go back to Dr. Amos Wilson's work and check it out. He offered a critique for the Joint Center for Policy Analysis and Research. And this is where I'm just like, the people that I named earlier, these are the individuals who I believe, for instance, Dr. Umar, he studied the work of Dr. Amos Wilson of sorts. And this, you can kind of be able to synergize that analysis, because I believe that Dr. Amos Wilson, he certainly would have been present at many of these events to gather intel. Now, let me read this, and I'm going to share where you can get this at. What makes this journal stand out from the rest is its mission and composition, a multidisciplinary platform exclusively focused on public policy issues related to Black politics in the United States and abroad. Written by scholars and practitioners for a general, non-specialist audience. The journal's mission is to feature in-depth and innovative approaches to advance the study of the full spectrum of Black identities, ethnicities, and diaspora, and how these perspectives inform political representation and public policy, with a particular focus on Black members of Congress and American politicals. The inaugural issue is devoted to research and reflections of this particular political moment after 8 years of the first Black president, Barack Obama. A special section is devoted to the legacy of Dr. Ron Walters, a preeminent scholar of Black political studies, noted civil rights activist, and one of the founding architects of the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, I called in to a radio show yesterday, and I asked the individuals, have they heard of Professor Dr. Ron Walters? And none of these individuals knew. And I'm just like, man, like somebody, somewhere, in Baltimore certainly should have be pulling individuals to the side and introducing members, to Dr. Ron Walters. He was at the University of Maryland, UMBC. I'm sorry, not UMBC, University of Maryland for a long time, but he eventually retired at Howard, and he wrote several books. One, and there's a memoir actually that just came out with him that I believe is a must read. But he also he wrote several books, Conservative Policy and Black Interests, as well as a book, Black Politics, I believe, from 1970s to 2000. I believe that's the title of the book. But he was quite instrumental in the Jesse Jackson campaign, as well as the Gary, Indiana political conference that happened in 1972. And I know they had a recent Back to Gary conference that was not as broadly attended. So I just feel that people should certainly know about the work of Dr. Ron Walters. And I think I did a book review on his book. I'm going to have to look back through that. I know I did something on it. I spoke about it. So I'm not sure how much I gave up in that, but the new book, shall I say. But some of his older books certainly are around. This is for serious organizers that, political organizers that truly are organizing for empowerment. So let me find this again. I'm going to finish this piece. And this book talks about black flight to white suburbs. And it says the black middle class flight to white suburbia was the next natural step of people bedeviled by the fantasy of living out their nearly white identity. America's effort to enforce its segregated housing policy initially targeted this class, who it was feared would bring with them the deterioration and the blight characteristic of the black ghetto, which whites like to forget they themselves created, owned, and managed. Massive suburban developments like the livet towns that were built in the 1950s explicitly excluded blacks, pandering to the racist fears of whites, who were fixated on their image of the black community as a crime and filth-filled, infested wasteland. To them, the best indicator of where the black middle class was headed was the condition of the communities they left behind. Having had no interest or desire in building any form of black infrastructure, black middle class presented the same blank resumes to their hostile white neighbors that they had presented to their former black ones. Despite their most fervent longings and an escape rate that reached 200,000 individuals per year by the 1970s, very few were able to crash the gates of the all-white suburbia. Housing research calculate when the proportion of black neighborhoods reaches 8%, and there's a book out called Tipping Point as well, whites will flee en masse for whiter environments. This figure is known in the field of real estate as the tipping point. You can talk about that, yeah. And indicates the point at which whites believe blacks become dominant. 8%. It is because of this sickness that most blacks end up redlined on the outer reaches of their old black neighborhoods, doors and windows locked, praying for armed white intervention to save them from their own. So it's kind of tough, objectively speaking, because the balanced analysis, for instance, is that, this is my commentary to that particular discussion. Unfortunately, in many urban environments, many young black males, due to poverty and, frustration and now violence and drugs and, lack of educational opportunities, many actually are turning, into predators, for instance, in our own communities. We cannot escape the realities that, unfortunately, many of us, we have no power in our own communities. And this is why previously I have worked in the Sandtown area at Baltimore Youth Opportunities, as well as what was called Community Building Partnership, CBP, in Sandtown. And later, I attempted to open of Pennsylvania and North Avenue. And so I learned some things, and, I reached out for many of the black middle class at that particular time, many even the so-called activists, if you will, many educated black people who claim that they are about whatever, political empowerment. And I didn't see many of them, like, at all. And it was shocking to me that these were the so-called activist class, of black educated people. And sometimes they would talk about the miseducation of the Negro. One that was on 88.9 in Baltimore for the longest time, and every week he would say things about the miseducation of the Negro. And I just was like, man, like I'm sitting here attempting to create this establishment, this store, and you just want to talk, right? You just want to have a conversation. You know, you want people to just listen to you. And that's where, unfortunately, I think that many people, and I know that we live in an online society, it's different now. Instead of brick and mortar, people are more click and order. But, you know, at that particular time, some 16, 17 years ago, where, you know, people were talking about what we need to do with Pennsylvania Avenue, I actually set out to do it, right? And I didn't see some of these people. And you know, it's just interesting coming back some 10, 15 years, 20 years later, folks talking about we need to develop Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm like, man, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I mean, I was there 20 years ago, trying to drumbeat calling in on radios. Some of these folk didn't have me on. That Larry Young morning show, he hasn't raised a finger, you know, for me all that time. So now I'm just like, I'm not sitting here waiting, you know, for anyone to give me a so-called upper hand or a handout, you know, and that's, you know, I mean, and we're taught, for instance, that what did Du Boyce have it? The talented 10th. The talented 10th will uplift the black community. And let me find something on Du Boyce in here. Let me give a analysis. This book I'm reading from the Certified Directory of Uncle Tom's. Let's see. All right, let me read something on what these people say about Du Boyce and Garvey. And I don't want to appear like I'm angry about these individuals, and not, you know, the individuals that I mentioned earlier. I just feel that, you know, you got people out here that's giving you shout outs, and you got to step up your organizing. And I'll also give an example, for instance, that the I am one in a million. Somebody called in after I was on and after I broke down knowledge, and they wanted to talk about some other stuff. I'm like, man, these folks are playing like they are playing games. Like it's about their group that's not doing a damn thing. And you know, I don't want to make it seem like just showing up is the end all be all. But I'm like, I mean, you know, you're talking about the work of Dr. Claud Anderson. I mean, and I've pushed his book over the years. Unfortunately, it hasn't necessarily got pushed at the CBC. I've pushed it at the Power Networking Conference, giving people an opportunity, giving individuals an opportunity to be aware, for instance, of that particular work, or the work of Dr. Amos Wilson. And I'm the only one that has done it, right? And so I'm not, you know, I'm not waiting for any, you know, so-called leaders to tap me on the head or tell me I'm doing a good job. Because let me just make this plain. I called in on a couple radio shows, and I'm about to read some things about Du Bois. And where's my time? I'm at 44 minutes. Okay. I'm going to read something about Du Bois in a second. I called in on a radio program the other day, and I haven't heard anybody ask the question, but I'm to a point now, it's like, all right, we need some some questions need to be asked. Some questions need to be asked. I asked the question, Kwesi Mfume, Ben Chavis, two former presidents of the NAACP. Now, I know for those who may not know, Baltimore NAACP has gone through some recent trauma and drama. But my question was for the the NAACP, and why haven't they supported Ben Jealous? Right now, I know some folk. He's mixed. He's he's a Rhodes Scholar. I mean, I've heard these things, and I've actually last few years at the CBC, I've asked him some questions, publicly, to the past few years, even before he announced that he was running. He came to the CBC, and I was like, any chance I get to ask him a question, I'm gonna ask him, right? And since nobody else asked him a question, I made it my business to ask him a question, and he answered it relatively good enough. I mean, sometimes people want people to quote Doc Ben or quote John Henry Clark or to quote Amos Wilson. I'm like, look, I mean, you just got to be, you got to have an open mind. That's all I want from individuals. I just want people to have enough respect to be able to listen, to have a intelligent conversation about, what and where, what the 21st century look like for black people. Like, that's what the question is going to have to be raised. So I asked Senator Larry Young about Kwesi Mfume, right? And he said, well, he's on the board of regents at Morgan State. So he may not want to get too involved in that because Mfume, Hogan, has power over the Board of Regents in Morgan State. Something to that effect. So you all can look up the Board of Regents and Kwesi Mfume and what he does there. I don't think he's the chair or whatever, but whatever his position is, that's why he's particularly silent. And I know there's some blacks for Hogan or something running around. I don't know what they think they're going to get out of this except red line redistrict and for instance, Baltimore, and a lack of the red line. And one thing I learned, from going to places like this is transportation, for instance, on a massive level, and for what it's worth, that potentially a transportation certainly could be an economically impactful means to transform the community, right? Which Governor Hogan worked against. And Ben Jealous has made this plain for the past few years. So I don't know what, people thinking about. I guess it's like, I just used the example. There's a quote on Dead Prez. Many people know about Dead Prez, but there's he talks about, in this, Dead Prez is a rap group. And in this song, you can hear Chairman O'Malley Shatella. He say, I'm not a hunter, but I'm told, but in the places like Antarctica, where the hunters, they are attempting to hunt a wolf, they would take a blade and they would put blood on the blade, and they would stick the blade in the ice so that when the wolves would be hunting or looking for food, the wolves would come and they would smell the blood and they would lick on the blade, thinking that they licking the blood of a dead animal, and they would be sucking their own blood after they cut their tongue, right? And so when we have individuals, for instance, that, a penny wise, a pound foolish of sorts, I got my $50,000, $60,000. That's what my organization got, and that's all I care about. I'm rolling with Hogan. I'm like, man, honestly, it would have been diplomatic. A good diplomatic strategy is just to keep it to yourself. Like, for instance, maybe Mr. Mfume is doing. I don't know where he's at right now with everything, but certainly it just go to show that in the bigger picture, many individuals actually will put their own interests over the interests of the masses, right? And so, bringing that up to what I was saying, when I first got elected, for instance, to the Central Committee, you know, I'm not a regular Central Committee person. Let me just make that plain. No, you know, I'm position positioning the right people to share the right information to have a more unified front of sorts. Now, I emailed Dr. Ben Chavis, right? And I didn't want to speak on behalf of the caucus, the Maryland Legislative Caucus, or the congressional. I'm sorry, or the Central Committee, or I spoke first for myself, as well as for the 44th district, and I CC'd his assistant, Claudette Perry, as well as I CC'd my senator and my delegate. And I asked the question, like, would you come to speak if we set up an event for you? So I didn't get a response from former president of the NAACP, Ben Chavis. And not that I, feel that he should respect me, but I've seen him on several different occasions, and he generally has been cordial. Actually, the Afro newspaper, who certainly has not covered any of my stories, even though I sent them stories several times, and I attended their 110-year anniversary as well as their 125th year anniversary, and I've sent them what I believe to be some very good op-ed stories, but they haven't, covered anything that I write and submit, and so. But I did go to their 125th year anniversary. It was in Greenbelt, Maryland. I saw Mr. Chavis there. I as well went to the book release for Dr. Ron Walters. That was at Howard University. No, it wasn't at Howard. It was at the Thurgood Marshall Center. I was like, Ron Walters, somebody putting out a book on him. I'm like, I'm there. Right on. So, and yes, you should look up Ron Walters. You should. So he saw me there as well. And I went up and said some things to him. Yeah, I was at the NNPA conference and mentioned, yes, I went to there, spent my good couple $100 to go to an NNPA conference. National Newspapers Publishers Association, over 200 different black-owned newspapers. It was at the Gaylord, and I went. No, I don't own, per se, a newspaper, but I wanted to connect to the black newspapers because, that's, we still need independent black media, black newspapers. So, and, I kind of laid that out. I don't know if I laid that out in the email, but I'm like, by now, he certainly should know of me and know of my work. But I didn't get a response. Claudette responded saying, well, Claudette Perry, I'm not going to say assistant, but she works with NNPA. She responded and she said that, well, Mr. Chavis's schedule is busy to the end of October. But I see Ben Chavis this weekend at Reverend Willie Wilson's church with Minister Farrakhan, right? And shout out, we're doing a Million Man March documentary. If anybody see that post, that's what we're working on, documentary on the Million Man March. So shout out to Eartha for putting that together. But I see him at the the something Million Man March or Fathers or Black Man Day event at the at Reverend Willie Wilson's church. So I'm like, oh, so you got a little selectiveness about who you show up to support and who you do not. So I'm like, all right, you the president, former president of the NAACP, and you and Mfume, Kwesi Mfume, both of you have been silent on this young man, right? So I'm just like, is it some older NAACP to younger? I'm like, this could put the NAACP, for instance, on the map, nationally and internationally, for what it's worth. So I'm like, man, you took the wrong time to be silent civil rights leaders, right? I mean, you picked the wrong time in history to be silent. I'm like, and not show up like you hiding. You're hiding like Nicodemus that didn't want to meet with Jesus. Only want to meet with him at night, right? They're more like Negro Demas, huh? So I'm like, man, Ben Jealous, I don't know if he done wrinkled a few feathers in Maryland or what. They treating him like he, like he got some kind of disease, like step away from me, like a leprosy or something, or step away from me. Like, we can't be affiliated with you. You're too radical. I guess that's what it, I guess that's what it is. He's, Hogan put out these socialists. He's a socialist and black political establishment leadership. They've taken it and run with it. Even Elijah Cummings has stood with him. So I'm like, man, what's up with these NAACP former presidents? So I just wanted to make it plain, y'all, about the CBC. But Ben Jealous, he actually spoke there. Shout out to Carnell for having him on. He spoke there with the other gubernatorial candidates. But I'm about to chime out here, but definitely the blue pill, the red pill, definitely get the books. I'm here. I'm your Neo for the day, the success scholar Haki Ami. Stay tuned in next week. We're going to have Dr. Maya Rockymore Cummings, the wife of Congressman Elijah Cummings, and we're going to talk about the book, not April Ryan's book, but we're going to talk about Omarosa's book. So stay tuned in, y'all. Holla at the Success Scholar. We on a mission. We taking over. It's the rise to the top. Stay tuned in. We're building a movement. Stay connected. I'm out. Peace.